What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We've got part 2 of our videos on sleep here. So if you haven't seen part 1, go ahead and click up here and go watch part 1. If you have seen part 1, you're in the right spot. Let's get into it. So what we're going to be talking about is, well, we've already talked about why is sleep important. So we talked about a few different things with that when it relates to athletes. And now the next thing we're going to talk about is, well, how the heck do we actually make it better? Because we know it's important, but we have to actually be able to act on that and make it better. So like we talked about before, there's two main things with your sleep, and it's really how long you're sleeping and how good the quality of your sleep is. Now, how long you're sleeping is pretty easy, right? The vast majority of us just don't set enough time aside to get enough sleep. That's the biggest issue that I see in the people that I train is just they'll sit down to sleep and they'll say, oh, well, I only had 7 hours. And that's just not good enough. If you're in bed for 7 hours, likely you're going to get like 6 and change in sleep or something like that. It's just not enough. So really, the biggest advice I can give as far as getting more total sleep is just realizing how important it is, setting aside more time. Maybe you need to wind down a little bit earlier, put the video games down a little bit earlier, or get off the computer or get away from work a little bit earlier, and just set aside more time. So it's not going to work for everybody. Obviously, if you have some sort of issue that's keeping you from sleeping longer, which we'll talk about later in this video, that you should address that. But by and large, the thing that will help you sleep longer is actually setting aside more time to sleep. But let's talk about sleep quality. So to understand sleep quality, you have to understand sleep cycles. Now, what the heck is a sleep cycle? So sleep actually comes in stages, and they follow one after each other. So basically, you've got being awake, you've got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and then you go back to being awake. And it follows this pattern. So stage 1 and stage 2 are considered light sleep. Stage 3 is considered deep sleep. And stage 4 is considered REM sleep. Now this pattern, it happens where you start when you're awake, you go to light sleep, you go to deep sleep, you go to REM sleep, you wake up. You have to follow this pattern. And it's really, really important to note that the vast majority of these restorative processes that we've talked about in the previous video happen during deep and REM sleep. So you got to get through the first 2 stages of light sleep, get into deep sleep, and then get into REM sleep. It's really not common to jump between like light sleep and REM sleep, or from awake to deep sleep or something like that. Generally, you have to go stage 1, 2, 3, 4. Most of your sleep cycles are going to be that way. So this is where one of the biggest things in sleep quality comes into play, and that's just making sure you can stay asleep. Because if anything interrupts this sleep cycle, you wake up and you got to start it all over again. And you can see how, I got into deep sleep for a little bit and then I woke up. Well, you didn't get to REM sleep. You got to start back at the beginning again. And that could happen at any different combination of ways. But basically the whole point is when you wake up super often, you spend a very large amount of time in light sleep and you spend significantly less in deep or in REM sleep. Now, this is really, really, really important to note, so don't miss this. 9 hours of sleep is not equivalent to 9 hours of sleep. You have to have the total time of sleep, and you have to have a measure of the quality of sleep. That is so important. So just because you got 9 hours one night or 7 hours the next night doesn't mean that the 9 hours was better and the 7 hours was worse. The quality is just so important. So like we mentioned, a big part of making sure you get quality sleep is just making sure you don't wake up. So I got a list of things here. This is my own personal list of things that I had to check off in my own sleep. And we'll talk about how we did each one of those just to make sure I didn't wake up, right? So first thing is light. Now, I usually go to bed pretty late and I wake up pretty late as well. Which is not great for another reason that we'll talk about later, but that's generally how my sleep has gone. And that becomes a problem because light wakes you up, and light wakes me up very quickly. So if I go to bed at midnight and I'm supposed to wake up at 10 or so, then when the sun comes up at like 7 a.m., I'm going to wake up, So a big thing for me was getting blackout curtains, making the room absolutely black. We've got some lights in there, like for a clock. We taped over the clock, different things like that. But light, big one, make sure there's no light in your room at all. Now, the second one was sounds. So for me, if I hear a sound, my brain just immediately goes to wherever that sound was, will wake me up, keep me from falling asleep. It's pretty annoying, to be honest with you, but it was a pretty easy fix. All I had to do was just wear earplugs. So it took me a few nights of getting used to the earplugs to, really get used to it. but it really, really helped. It helped me not be able to, or not have to focus on the things that are happening around me, just be able to relax and quiet down, and the sounds didn't wake me up anymore. The next one here on my list was pets. So one of my dogs here at home just loves to dive bomb my bed for just no reason at all hours in the morning, whenever it wants. So that was a pretty easy decision just to, well, you now no longer sleep in my room, and that eliminated the times that I woke up when my bed just got freaking dive bombed at like 4 a.m. Next one here is temperature. So that's both too hot and too cold. So I'm a pretty big guy and I heat up really easily. So the summers here are pretty tough for me because I live in Arizona. For that, I ended up buying a unit that actually circulates water. It's like a pad on my bed and it keeps me cool. And then obviously with the air conditioning, because just the pad doesn't do everything for me. And then in the winter, there's like, if it's under like 64 or so inside, then I'm usually shivering and it keeps me awake and it doesn't allow me to really relax. So that's kind of the range I'm looking for, is 64 to 70 degrees, somewhere in there. I've read online that they suggest like 68 degrees or something like that. And basically just find the temperature that works best for you. But the whole point here is that being too hot or too cold will wake you up or keep you from falling asleep. Next one's an uncomfortable sleeping position. So for me, I actually sleep on an air mattress because it is the most comfortable for me. I've got some really weird body proportions and some very odd ranges of motion in my hips and in my shoulders. For whatever reason, it just I don't do well on a normal bed. So I'm sure one of these days I'll revise this because I'll have found a bed that works great for me. But in the meantime, air mattress works best for me. Literally, I would try and go to bed, and I couldn't because it was so uncomfortable on the normal bed that I had upstairs. So this doesn't mean to go and get an air mattress. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is your sleeping position is very important. So if you got to prop some pillows up somewhere, if you have to change the mattress, if you got to change the pillow, whatever, it's really, really important that you are comfortable so you can fall asleep and stay asleep. Now, the next one is not being able to breathe. And this is a massive topic just on its own. So I highly recommend you start Googling this and learn about this and just gather a whole bunch of information and soak it up. But it happens in a few different ways. So I'm sure you guys have heard of sleep apnea before. And basically what that means is your airway, for whatever reason, just gets cut off. So whether that's you're in the wrong position, whether that's the tongue falls into the airway, whether the airway's not big enough, whatever, for whatever reason, the airway gets cut off when you're sleeping. And then that basically sends the signal to your body that you are getting strangled and it wakes you up. And for some people, this happens hundreds of times a night. And you can imagine how detrimental that would be to your sleep if you are waking up hundreds of times a night. Sometimes, and most of the time, they don't even realize the vast majority of times they wake up. So they just wake up feeling crappy. They don't really realize that, well, they woke up 100 times last night. So that's a big one. Sleep apnea. Another big one, which I have had problems with before, was my nose. Actually, how it formed. I won't get into the specifics here, but basically my nasal passages weren't big enough. So I had surgery to correct that. Just from how I developed, my nasal passages weren't big enough, and I actually couldn't fall asleep because I couldn't get enough air. So my body was constantly freaking out like I was being strangled because I couldn't get enough air. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can go down on this path. Really, the main point, the main takeaway is you have to make sure that you can breathe relaxed, comfortably. There needs to be nothing in the way of you just relaxing and breathing nice and easy. Otherwise, that'll probably wake you up. Another one here on my list is roommates. So if your roommate has a different schedule than you, that's going to be an issue. If their alarm goes off, that's going to wake you up. It's going to take you out of the sleep cycle you're in. If they go downstairs and start making food or whatever, and they make a little bit of noise, and that wakes you up, that's going to wake you up. It's going to interrupt your sleep cycle. So just making sure that your roommates are conscious of you trying to get more sleep, respectful of that, maybe have a conversation with them, and have them do the best they can to not wake you up, and you do the same for your roommates. And the last point I've got here is winding down from the day mentally. So when you are trying to go to sleep, there's a hormone called melatonin that helps you get to sleep. And when you are waking up in the morning, there's a hormone called cortisol that wakes you up. It spikes and it wakes you up. Now that cortisol is also really active, and there's a lot of it going around your body when you are doing things that require some amount of effort. So if you go and play, I'm sure you guys have had a situation where you've gone and played a baseball game late at night, and then you've come back home and tried to sleep. You just can't sleep, or maybe you got in a fight with a parent or a friend or something like that when you're trying to go to bed and you just can't go to bed. One of the things that's happening there is there's a bunch more cortisol in your system, and cortisol wakes you up. So how you get rid of the cortisol, there's a whole bunch of different stuff. So don't take this as the end all be all. There's a whole long list of things to do here. But really the idea is you basically just want to relax. So cortisol is kind of like the fight or flight response, where you get a little, amped up. So if you are doing that right before going to bed, or if you're not giving yourself enough time to wind down for the day, both physically and mentally, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to go to sleep because that hormone's what's wake you up. So basically the whole point here is when you're trying to go to sleep, make sure a little bit of time before you're winding down, allowing yourself to really relax and get ready to shut down for the night. All right, so we've got that list of things that we want to work on, right? But how do we know if when we implement them, how do we know if they're making any changes? And this is where a sleep monitor comes in. So this is one of those things that absolutely changed my view on sleep. So important. I highly recommend you buy one. And there's kind of three main players in the market right now. There's FitBit, Whoop, and Oura. I personally go with FitBit because the data is really accurate for a wearable sensor. And it's the cheapest of the three. So it fits my budget because it's much cheaper. It's pretty accurate data, so it's perfect for me. Now, obviously, once you get a Fitbit, what you're gonna do is then make one of these changes or make a change or two at a time and then see what happens to your sleep data. So let's say for 1 week, you're like, I'm gonna put up blackout curtains for a week in my room and see what happens to my sleep. So then you have a baseline of like a week or so, and then put up blackout curtains and sleep for a week, and then compare the two. So you can actually compare how much time did you spend at sleep, how much time did you spend in deep and REM sleep, and you could see, are the changes making a difference or are they not? This isn't something that you can really, you could if you feel like absolute crap and then you feel better. That could be a good indication, but ultimately it's going to be pretty hard to see the differences. If you're getting 15 to 30 more minutes of deep and REM sleep, that's a pretty big deal, and that's going to be pretty hard to feel just from like a week. So highly recommend getting some sort of sleep monitor. Highly recommend it's a Fitbit, just from the cost to what you actually get out of it. And if this video has convinced you that you should buy something to go ahead and monitor your sleep, I've got a link in the description for the Fitbit model that I recommend. Now, I do get a very small cut of that, and I'd be very appreciative if you use that link, but I totally understand if it's not in the budget. So I think the watch below is like $150, or at least it is at the time that I'm posting this. So that's not in everybody's budget. I totally get that. So what I highly recommend, and what I did with my own, was just go on used websites. OfferUp was where I got mine. I think I got mine for like $60 a few years back, and it's been great. So if you need to buy, or if you really, really, really want to buy something new, you want to support the channel, want to support me for bringing you the information, then highly recommend you get the Fitbit at the link below. But again, totally understand that it's not in everybody's budget. And if it isn't, just go ahead and get it, one of the Fitbit models that actually tracks sleep on like OfferUp or Craigslist or something like that. Those will work great. All right, guys. Well, that's what we got on sleep. Hope you enjoyed this little two-part series. Hope you learned something. Hope you took something away that you can actually apply and make your sleep better, make your training better, make your life better. So really appreciate you guys stopping by. Subscribe to the channel, man. Got info like this coming out all the time. Thanks, guys.